empty shelves, soaring prices, and unexpected shortages. What if your favorite foods vanished this winter? Today, we're uncovering the 9 foods that might be impossible to find in the coming months. From everyday essentials to special treats, we'll dive into the surprising reasons behind these potential shortages. Stay with us until the end to discover how you can prepare and what alternatives you might have. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to stay updated on the latest food trends and tips. Let's get started. 1. Olive oil. Before we talk about the other items on our list, let's focus on olive oil, a kitchen staple that might become a rare find this winter. Unusually dry weather and severe droughts in major olive-producing countries like Spain and Italy have led to significantly smaller harvests. These regions are experiencing some of the driest conditions they've seen in decades, causing olive trees to produce fewer fruits. But weather isn't the only issue. A harmful bacteria called Xylella fastidiosa has been affecting olive groves across Europe, damaging trees and reducing yields even further. With both climate challenges and plant diseases at play, the global supply of olive oil is under serious strain. If you love drizzling olive oil over your salads or using it in your cooking, you might notice prices climbing or shelves emptying. It could be a good idea to consider alternatives or stock up while you still can. 2. Coffee beans. Before we move to the next item, let's talk about coffee beans. Coffee isn't just a drink. It's a ritual for millions of people worldwide. But did you know that the global coffee supply is under serious threat? The coffee crisis goes beyond what many realize. Climate change is wreaking havoc on coffee plantations, especially in key growing regions like Brazil, Colombia, and Ethiopia. Brazil, which produces 1/3 of the world's coffee, has experienced severe frosts and droughts over the past few years, disrupting harvests. These climate extremes are not typical and are leading experts to predict that coffee prices could surge as supplies dwindle. One study from the International Coffee Organization shows that nearly 60% of coffee species are at risk of extinction due to climate change. The Arabica beans, favored for their smooth taste, are especially vulnerable. This isn't just bad news for coffee drinkers. It's a livelihood issue for millions of farmers who depend on coffee cultivation. Adding to the issue, labor shortages in coffee-growing regions, combined with political instability, have further slowed production and export. This means you might not only see a price increase, but also find that your favorite brand or blend is harder to find on store shelves this winter. 3. Wheat products. Before we dive deeper, let's consider wheat products. Bread, pasta, and cereals, all staple foods that rely on a steady wheat supply. But global events are putting this essential crop at risk. The ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine, 2 of the world's largest wheat exporters, has had a massive impact on the global wheat market. Ukraine's ability to plant and harvest wheat has been severely disrupted by the war, and Russia has imposed export restrictions, cutting off supply to many countries in Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. But that's not the only factor. Wheat crops across the US, Australia, and parts of Europe are suffering from extreme weather conditions like droughts, floods, and heat waves. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA, this year's wheat yields are expected to be the lowest in a decade, largely due to these climatic challenges. The United Nations World Food Program has warned that the ongoing wheat crisis could trigger a rise in global hunger. For consumers, this means not only higher prices for bread and pasta, but potential shortages as suppliers struggle to keep up with demand. 4. Rice. Before we continue, let's focus on rice, a staple food for more than half of the world's population. Rice shortages may seem far-fetched, but recent events suggest it's a very real possibility this winter. Asia, which produces more than 90% of the world's rice, is facing severe challenges. In China, India, and Pakistan, massive floods have damaged rice fields, while droughts in parts of Southeast Asia have also reduced crop yields. These extreme weather events are driven by changing climate patterns, and they're becoming more frequent. In Pakistan, which is one of the top 5 rice exporters in the world, catastrophic flooding in 2022 destroyed millions of acres of farmland. According to the International Rice Research Institute, this disaster alone could reduce Pakistan's rice production by 20%, impacting global supply. The global rice market is tightly interlinked, meaning that shortages in one region can affect prices and availability in others. For many households that rely on rice as a key component of their diet, this could spell trouble, especially in regions where food security is already fragile. 5. Citrus fruits. Before we move forward, let's examine the case of citrus fruits. Oranges, lemons, and grapefruits are popular not just for their taste, but also for their high vitamin C content. However, citrus fruits are facing a two-pronged threat: disease and climate change. A lesser-known but devastating bacterial disease called citrus greening has been spreading across the world. This disease prevents the fruit from ripening properly, leaving it bitter and inedible. In the U.S., Florida's citrus industry has been hit the hardest, with production levels at their lowest in over a century. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Florida's orange production has dropped by nearly 75% in the last decade due to this disease. At the same time, unpredictable weather patterns, like heat waves in Europe and droughts in California, are impacting citrus yields. The combination of these factors is likely to lead to limited availability of fresh citrus fruits this winter, with prices expected to rise as demand outstrips supply. 6. Meat products. Before we continue, let's dive into the topic of meat. Whether it's beef, pork, or poultry, meat shortages may become more frequent this winter. The underlying reasons are complex but interconnected. First, we have the issue of animal feed. Grains, such as corn and soy, are essential for feeding livestock, but poor crop yields and global conflicts have made these grains more expensive and harder to obtain. As a result, many livestock farmers are being forced to reduce their herds, which means less meat is available for consumers. In addition to feed shortages, labor shortages are hitting the meatpacking industry. Many processing plants are still recovering from the effects of the pandemic, leading to slower production and distribution. Meanwhile, inflation and rising transportation costs are driving up prices across the board. In countries like the US, some experts believe we could see a 10 to 15% increase in meat prices by the end of the year. So if you're planning on stocking up for winter, it might be worth keeping an eye on your local meat suppliers. 7. Dairy items. Before moving on, let's discuss the dairy industry, which is facing its own set of challenges. Dairy items such as milk, cheese, and butter are daily staples for many families, but this winter, they could be harder to come by. Labor shortages are one of the main issues. Dairy farms across the US and Europe are struggling to find enough workers to handle production. The pandemic exacerbated the issue, and many farms have not recovered. On top of that, the rising cost of animal feed is forcing some dairy farmers to scale back operations. Another factor contributing to dairy shortages is transportation disruptions. With fuel prices skyrocketing, the cost of shipping dairy products to supermarkets has increased dramatically. These combined issues could lead to limited availability of fresh dairy items, particularly in more remote regions. 8. Canned goods. Before we get to the final item, let's focus on canned goods. Canned vegetables, fruits, and soups have long been a go-to option for stocking up during the winter. However, even these pantry staples could be in short supply soon. The reason for this is twofold. First, there's a shortage of materials used to make cans, such as aluminum and tin. Global supply chain disruptions, including the lingering effects of the pandemic, have made it difficult for manufacturers to source these materials. Secondly, there's been a surge in demand for canned goods as people prepare for potential shortages, which is putting additional pressure on manufacturers. Industry experts say we could see a shortage of certain canned goods this winter, especially those that rely on seasonal produce, such as tomatoes and corn. Prices for canned items have already started to rise, and they're expected to continue climbing as the holidays approach. 9. Spices. Let's take a look at spices. They may seem like a small part of your grocery list, but spices are essential for adding flavor to meals. Unfortunately, many popular spices, like cinnamon, vanilla, and black pepper, may become harder to find in the coming months. One reason for this is trade disruptions. Many of the world's spices are imported from countries in Asia and Africa, where shipping delays and transportation bottlenecks have caused major backlogs. According to industry reports, the cost of importing spices has risen by over 30% in the last year, and these delays are only adding to the problem. For example, vanilla, which is primarily sourced from Madagascar, has been hit particularly hard by both poor harvests and export delays. As a result, prices for high-quality vanilla are expected to skyrocket, and it may be challenging to find certain spices on grocery store shelves this winter. As we've explored today, a range of global issues, from climate change to geopolitical conflicts, are affecting the availability of many foods we often take for granted. Olive oil, coffee beans, wheat, rice, citrus fruits, meat, dairy, canned goods, and spices all are under threat. But awareness is key. By staying informed, you can take proactive steps to prepare for these shortages without resorting to panic buying. Start by keeping an eye on local supplies, exploring alternatives when necessary, and supporting sustainable farming practices whenever possible. Together, we can navigate these challenging times. Thank you for watching today's video. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our future updates. Stay prepared, stay informed, and we'll see you in the next video.